meeting of the Planning Commission, Monday, October 14th, 2024, is hereby called to order at 6:32 p.m. Iris, can you call roll, please?
Moreno,
Here.
Mitchell,
Here.
Najak. Here. Rigby is absent. Scanoni. Here. Fly.
Here.
Quinn.
Here.
And Masin Maboop is absent.
And Councillor Maboop is not here today, correct? Okay, so we do not have a city council update. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes for September 23rd, 2024. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes of September 23rd, 2024 as written.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Motion and second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. So we have public comment. Iris, do we have anyone signed up to speak? Okay, thank you. Now we have Commission for Citizen Involvement, the CCI, general updates. And we have several. We have an invitation that has already passed for the Old Town General Meeting that was held Thursday, October 10th, and I won't go into the details of that unless I have to. Okay, and then we have Waluga Neighborhood Association Annual Meeting, Wednesday, October 16th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. at Our Savior's Lutheran Church Fireside Room, 15751 Quarry Road. What's happening in Waluga? They will have tasty bites and beverages at 6:30, compliments of Elephant's Deli, Starbucks, and Albertsons. 7 p.m., say hello to Waluga neighborhood board members, emergency preparedness, coordinators, and neighbors. Elections for 2024-2025 board members. There will be listen, learn, and ask questions from the LO School District's Mary Kay Larson, Executive Director of Communications, and Tony Vandenberg, Executive Director of Project Management, on what's the future for Lake Grove Elementary School, its property, the LO School District's long-range plan, and the 2025 third school bond. Welcome Scott Lind, Lake Oswego City Emergency Management Services Coordinator, and other announcements and discussion. They are looking forward to seeing you all again. Questions, you can go to their email, waluga.neighborhood.association@gmail.com, or their website, waluganeighborhood.org. Then we have Uplands Neighborhood Association General Membership Meeting at 7 p.m. at the Lake Oswego Junior High at Uplands Library. October 17th, 2024. There is a semi-annual meeting to hear about and discuss what is happening in Uplands. Special presentation, alternative ways to get backup power during a power outage. Here's a chance for you to find out alternatives for power during an outage. Think powering your furnace, your refrigerator, lights, etc. Buzz Chandler will present alternatives, accounting for price, needs, ease of install, etc. We'll have plenty of time for a Q&A. Neighborhood communication. We have set up a system to be able to contact Uplands residents in case of natural disasters, fires, downed trees and power lines, and for events like the neighborhood picnic. The system is confidential. Over 100 of your neighbors have already signed up. Please hover your phone's camera over the QR code in this postcard and click on the link that pops up to register. Mark your calendars and save the date. Questions, contact Tom Bland, chair, at blandt50@hotmail.com. That's BLANDT50@hotmail.com. We have a Mountain Park Neighborhood Association community event. Find us on Facebook and write us at MTPA parkneighborhoodassoc@gmail.com. That would be Mountain Park Neighborhood gmail.com. Thursday, October 17th, 2024 at 7 p.m. at Mountain Park Community Church Sanctuary, 40 McNary Parkway, Lake Oswego. Are you spending too much time on your phone and computer? Community engagement meeting, meet your neighbors. Maybe join a safety committee. General elections. After a disaster, local first responders and other assistants may be unable to reach people right away. Does your apartment complex, management company, homeowners association, condo complex, or neighborhood have the resources and supplies to protect you and your family? Did they during the pandemic? Come hear representatives speak about B2WR, B2 Weeks Ready. And finally, we have Bryant Neighborhood Association Annual Meeting, Monday, October 28th, 2024, 7:15 to 9 p.m. at Lake Ridge Middle School. Please RSVP at www.bryantlo.org/RSVP. That's BRYANTLO.org/RSVP. There will be beverages and desserts. Draft agenda highlights, 7:15 to 8, formal meeting, 8 to 9, informal discussion, election of our 2025 Board of Directors, Lake Oswego Sustainability Network, LOSN, presentation, emergency prep update with focus on new 2 Weeks Ready campaign, the status of litigation related to public access to Oswego Lake, brief update on the BNA budget, resident input. View the latest agenda at their website, bryantlo.org. Please let us know if you're interested in joining our Bryant Neighborhood Association Board of Directors. We welcome your participation on the board and or our special committees. There is a wide range of interesting projects that allow you to contribute. You can email us at bnassoc.18@gmail.com for more details. The next on our agenda, we have findings, conclusions, and order. First one, 7.1, Housing Needs and Production Strategies, House Bill 2003, LU 24-0024. On September 23rd, 2024, the Planning Commission made a preliminary recommendation that the City Council approve the proposed housing production strategy and directed staff to return with the draft findings, conclusion, and order. Our staff coordinator is Erik Olson.
Thanks, Chair Moreno. I guess I would just point out that, yeah, typically we wouldn't present on the findings necessarily, but you'd have some deliberation and vote on those. So.
Thank you. So, yes.
Chair Marino, yeah, deliberation, you've already had a tentative decision. If somebody wants to talk more, certainly happy to, but I guess the question is whether the findings represent the position of the majority of the commission.
Okay. Are there any revisions to the findings? Or if not, is there a motion to approve?
Seeing it, there seems to be no revisions that anyone wants. I move to approve the findings as written.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries.
I would just note for the record that Commissioner Najek voted in the affirmative, even though she was absent, which is fine for the last hearing.
Next on the agenda, we have item 7.2, Community Development Code Amendments related to Stormwater Management, LU 24-0022. On September 23, 2024, the Planning Commission made a preliminary recommendation that the City Council approve the proposed amendments and directed staff to return with the draft findings, conclusion, and order. Staff coordinator is Sonja Johnson. And again, are there any revisions to these findings? And if not, is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the findings as written.
Do we have a second?
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion.
Well, even though you were absent as in the previous, you're eligible to vote.
Aye to approve. Okay. Anyone opposed? No. Motion carries. Okay, so next on the agenda, we have public hearings. First is wastewater treatment plant, LU 24-0030, ordinance 2953. A request from the City of Lake Oswego for amendments to the comprehensive plan, community health and public safety, public facilities and services, wastewater collection and treatment section, and policies 8 and 10 regarding a new wastewater treatment facility, amending the 2013 update of the wastewater master plan. Staff coordinator is Stephen Broadus?
Hi, Stefan.
Stefan, sorry.
No worries.
Okay. Mr. Boone.
Thank you. This is a legislative decision, which is generally a policy decision within the discretion of the City Council. The Planning Commission will review the legislative proposal and make a recommendation to the City Council. Although a legislative decision may be discretionary, it must also comply with any applicable state law, as well as any applicable statewide planning goal or administrative rules adopted pursuant to RS Chapter 197. A legislative amendment to the Community Development Code must also comply with any applicable provision of Lake Oswego Comprehensive Plan. Public hearing process will begin with a presentation by staff. Testimony will then be received by the public. Individuals will be allowed up to 5 minutes. Recognized neighborhood association, homeowner association, government agencies, or other incorporated public interest organizations will be allowed up to 10 minutes. The time limits do not include time taken by questions from the commission or responses to those questions. Testimony by attorneys, representatives, and witnesses on behalf of which are part of the presentation by a person shall be counted within that person's time limit. Any person in attendance may cede his or her time for testimony to another person, but in no case shall any person's testimony be increased to greater than 10 minutes. Does any commissioner need to declare a financial conflict of interest? Seeing none, Stefan Broadus for the staff report, please.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Stefan Broadus. I am the Director of Special Projects here for the city. I work in our engineering department. And I'm here tonight to discuss 2 minor amendments to the comprehensive plan as well as the wastewater master plan as it relates to the new proposed wastewater treatment facility in the Foothills neighborhood in Lake Oswego. For some background, Lake Oswego sewer flows to 2 receiving sewer plants. A small percentage of the city in the southwest quadrant of town flows to the Durham plant that's owned and operated by Clean Water Services. This represents probably less than 20% of the overall sewer flows from Lake Oswego. The remainder of which goes to Tryon Creek wastewater plant, as I mentioned, in the Foothills area, and that is owned and operated by City of Portland Bureau of Environmental Services. City of Lake Oswego, while we do not own the plant, we do contribute a majority of the flows to that plant along the lines of a 70% Lake Oswego, 30% City of Portland flow share. That plant was constructed about 60 years ago and is reaching the end of its useful life. So the City of Portland and the City of Lake Oswego began exploring options for how to meet new permitting requirements as well as address seismic and other structural issues with the existing plant. It was found that a replacement plant would actually be more cost effective than retrofitting the existing plant. So in 2020, the two cities entered into an intergovernmental agreement that would define the roles and responsibilities for pursuing this new treatment plant in the area. Since then, and I should mention, under this agreement, the city of Lake Oswego would own and operate the new plant with with the city of Portland paying for their minority flow, basically reversing the roles that are currently in place. So since that intergovernmental agreement was executed in 2020, the project team has been working on advancing the project into implementations. That includes land acquisition, environmental permitting, as well as engineering design on the new plant. Current schedule anticipates construction starting in 2026, with the new facility being online and operational in the year 2028. So all of that brings me to why I'm here today, which is basically to perform some housekeeping. The two plans that we have some text amendments proposed for, so the comprehensive plan and the wastewater master plan, they describe wastewater treatment for Lake Oswego as it currently is, being performed by BES, City of Portland, BES. And so these proposed text amendments make minor modifications to describe this intent of having wastewater treatment provided by a plant owned and operated by the City of Lake Oswego. So a little bit more specifically, the comprehensive plan amendment includes some minor text updates to reference this proposed facility, and then the wastewater master plan, the proposed amendments there add the facility to the project list. There's a capital improvement project list in that master plan. It included several rehabilitation projects to replace pipelines, to work on pump stations that the city of Lake Oswego already owns. This amendment would add the new treatment plant to that list of projects as well. So with that background and with those proposed changes, staff's recommendation is to approve those proposed amendments as presented, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Do we have any questions? Iris, is there anyone signed up to? No. Okay. So, excuse me. So then do we, excuse me, do we put it up for a motion in this case?
You can either, deliberate as to the motion, or put forward a motion, deliberate after, or simplify, whatever you'd like. But yeah, you can take multiple different approaches, I guess.
Thank you.
I move to tentatively approve the proposal and direct staff to prepare written findings, conclusions, and a recommendation and present it to the commission at its next regular meeting for adoption.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Okay. And so, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. So motion approved. Next on the agenda, we have Flood Hazard Management Code Amendments, LU 24-0037, Ordinance 2952. A request from the City of Lake Oswego for the adoption of amendments to the Community Development Code, LOC 50, to comply with Oregon National Flood Insurance Program NFIP, Endangered Species Act, ESA measures. Staff coordinator is Michael McNamee, correct? McNamee. Sorry, I'll get these right. And I'm sorry, before I continue, thank you for the report, Mr. Broadus. Okay.
Hearing process is the same, legislative decision, same time limits, 5 minutes, 10 minutes for homeowner associations, neighborhood associations, et cetera. This gentleman was in you heard the hearing process before. If you wish to testify on this one, or do you want me to repeat the whole spiel? All right. Okay, so I think we don't need to repeat it. So with that, go ahead with your presentation.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Michael McNamee, and I am an associate planner with the Planning Department. With me is Tim Roberts from Engineering. We are here to discuss proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance, which would ensure continued compliance with FEMA's National Flood Insurance Program. Tim will cover why these changes are necessary and how they relate to the Endangered Species Act. After that, I'll take back over and briefly discuss the options that were provided to us by FEMA before diving into the proposed amendments themselves. There is a FEMA imposed timeline, so I'll discuss that as well.
Hello, my name is Tim Roberts. I'm the current floodplain administrator here at the city. I wanted to give a little bit of background about what brought about these changes and what our current floodplain review process is. So as a condition of being a participating community in the National Flood Insurance Program, FEMA requires the city to regulate all development within the special flood hazard area, which is defined as the land that would be inundated in the event of a 100-year flood or 1% annual chance flood. The new rules are coming about from an ongoing years-long lawsuit process with FEMA to comply with the Federal Endangered Species Act. And the main change that is being implemented by FEMA has to do with new requirements for development in the floodplain area, specifically what they're calling a biological habitat assessment, which would be required to demonstrate that any proposed development will not result in a net loss of habitat for critically endangered species. Specifically, it has to be completed by a qualified professional, and this would be in addition to the already required floodplain management area permits. Currently, what the city requires is a site plan that shows that proposed development is either outside of the special flood hazard area, or if it's within that area, what building methods will be done to flood-proof the structure or to make it safe from flooding. The FEMA model ordinance does establish criteria for what the habitat assessment should include. They do have several options that Michael will go over later, or other options besides the model ordinance. And typically, the city reviews between 10 and 20 of these permit applications in a given year. And here is just a map representation. All the areas in bright yellow are properties that are intersecting the special flood hazard area. We estimate that this is approximately 400 plus properties within the city. Currently, according to most recent data, there are 261 active NFIP policies in the city with a total coverage amount of $67 million and a premium of $158,000. I'll hand it back to Michael.
Thank you. So before I move on, I just want to point out some good reasons for maintaining our compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program. So the first is that property owners in Lake Oswego remain eligible for policies under the program. The second is that the city will continue to be eligible for disaster assistance from FEMA. And then the third is that there are some city projects that are in the special flood hazard area, like the wastewater management plant and the potential redevelopment of the foothills area that could be impacted by if we didn't adopt the ordinance or choose one of the other options. So just wanted to point that out. So FEMA gave localities 3 options to comply with the new NFIP requirements. One was to adopt a model ordinance provided by FEMA. This is the option that the City Council chose to continue with, and I'll discuss it in more depth in the next slide. The other 2 options would have been to review new development on a permit-by-permit basis with a habitat analysis, or to prohibit all new development in the special flood hazard area. The model ordinance option was seen by staff as the most clear and objective out of the 3, while not imposing a regulatory taking on property owners. FEMA's model ordinance was adapted to fit our zoning ordinance, where it would amend Lake Oswego Code 500511, the standards for flood management areas. It would add a new Section 7 to these standards that deal with no net loss to flood storage, water quality, and riparian vegetation. 4 existing sections would be renumbered since they would now be below Section 7. And the amendments would also add several new definitions to 500511 and change some other sections so that they make references to the standards in Section 7. To address the no net loss standard, the code uses 3 proxies: undeveloped space, pervious surface, and trees. Development proposals would not be permitted to reduce undeveloped space that is fish accessible and egressable. If a new development would impact undeveloped space, it would need to be that undeveloped space would need to be replaced at a ratio that is dependent on the project's location within the special flood hazard area and whether the mitigation happens off-site. At minimum, a replacement ratio of 1.5 to 1 would be required. Similarly, the new code would not permit a net increase in impervious surface area within the special flood hazard area, unless low-impact development or green infrastructure is used to infiltrate and treat stormwater produced by the new impervious surface. Replacement of pervious surface at least a 1-to-1 ratio would also be permitted. As far as trees are concerned, the code would require that any trees in the special flood hazard area that would be removed as part of new development and exceed 6 inches in diameter would need to be replaced with native species at a ratio that depends on the size of the trees. If mitigation of any of those 3 proxies is not possible, the code requires that new development must address stormwater management practices, including water quality treatment and stormwater retention. There are some development activities that are exempt from the no net loss standards that are outlined in the code. That would include normal maintenance of structures, street maintenance, and landscaping maintenance. FEMA has outlined several deadlines for compliance with the pre-implementation control measures. Localities need to tell FEMA which of the 3 options they will be choosing by December 1st. Lake Oswego has already indicated to FEMA that we will be moving forward with the model ordinance option. Data collection for floodplain development activities has to begin by January 31st of next year, with reporting of that data required annually starting in January 2026. Implementation of the option must begin by July 31st, 2025, according to FEMA. However, since City Code does not currently have requirements for the data collection that is required to begin next January, staff has taken the approach that code changes must be implemented by then. If the Planning Commission recommended that the City Council adopt the amendments at this meeting and adopted the findings at their next meeting on October 28th, the amendments would go to the Council for final decision at their November 19th meeting. And that would result in an effective date for the ordinance of January 2nd, 2025. So that would meet the January 31st deadline. Staff finds that the proposed code amendments comply with the applicable sections of the comprehensive plan, and the procedure for considering the code amendments complies with the applicable code requirements. Therefore, staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend adoption of the draft ordinance 2952 to the City Council with code amendments dated October 2nd, 2024. That concludes my presentation. Tim or I would be happy to take any questions you have at this time. And I heard Evan Boone and Director Numano talking while I was presenting, so if you have any corrections, okay. Just wanted to make sure.
I will add, if you could go back to the map, the slide with the map. This slide shows all the entirety of the property that has some portion of it within the special flood hazard area. So I just want to make it clear that doesn't mean that the special flood hazard area actually covers the entire property. I think there are probably many properties where the special flood hazard area is just on a small portion, and they're going to have no problem. The development will be outside of that. But there are some properties where it covers a significant portion of it. So I just want to make it clear that even though the map shows the entire property, it doesn't mean that the flood hazard area actually extends over the entire property.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions about the staff report?
Yeah, I just have one question for you. You mentioned data collection. What is the scope of that? What is the goals of data collection? How do you do that?
FEMA hasn't necessarily given us a full explanation of what that would entail yet. They have scheduled several informational seminars coming up in the next few months where we expect to get more information about what that would include. My understanding at this point is that if we were to adopt the model ordinance, we would be collecting data on those specific criteria that they set forth for the habitat assessment. We would essentially just be compiling data from the habitat assessments to report to FEMA how effective it is, what sort of projects are being caught by this new requirement, what are their findings, just basic items like that. But we expect to get more information within the next month or two once FEMA kind of fully rolls out what they're expecting to see.
I guess I would just add, I mean, obviously, under the model ordinance, we're looking at 3 indicators. And so the question is, have those indicators moved? If you have a development that is going to result in loss of trees, then how is that mitigated in new trees? If you have an area that you have, I think, surface, the impervious surface, or the development area, if you're losing that, then how have you mitigated for that? Where's the replacement? Because under no net loss, that's what we're required to show, is that those indicators had no net loss. So without putting, and a point from staff's position is without getting the data when the application is filed and knowing how that's going to affect those indicators, we wouldn't be able to report at the end of January 2026 what happened on those. So that's why we need the ordinance in place ahead of time, so the people can tell us on their sites what their indicator characteristics are on the property now, and post-development what's going to be there.
And I would also add that this reporting is required in order for the city to maintain participation in the National Flood Insurance Program. Our comprehensive plan states that we will maintain compliance in the National Flood Insurance Program, and as Mr. Roberts alluded to, we have several hundred properties that actually currently have FEMA flood insurance. So maintaining that program is one of the goals. And the reason why we want to adopt standards rather than going the permit by permit approach, which is the other option, is that we will have actual standards in the code so the applicants will understand what they need to comply with and staff will know what we need to review. If we do permit by permit, it's essentially comply with the Endangered Species Act, which is obviously not clear and objective and would be much more difficult for a property owner to show compliance with and staff to review.
So everything that's on the map that's in yellow that are private homes, is there any impact to them in any way?
Not to existing development, but if they propose new development,
Right, it's all new.
and it's
but
within the special flood hazard area, then they'll be subject to these new standards.
Yeah, okay.
And I would just add, like Jessica said earlier, just because a property is yellow doesn't mean the whole property is covered by the special flood hazard area. Oftentimes, as it stands now for these reviews, it can be as simple as an applicant sending in a site plan that shows what I'm proposing is not within the special flood hazard area, and then you can close the review out pretty simply, which could be the case for a lot of projects with this new requirement. It would just be another box they have to check that they're not going to be impacted. But for the properties that are entirely within the special flood hazard area, that's more what they're trying to regulate here.
Any other questions? Iris, has anyone signed up to testify in person or virtually?
No.
Thank you.
Before you move to deliberation, on one of the hearing procedures I forgot to inquire, does anybody need to declare a financial conflict of interest?
No.
So I think that would constitute, does anybody have any property that's in the special flood hazard area? Okay.
Let's look carefully. No.
Okay, thank you.
Yellow areas?
Oh, we'll need to open for testimony for a question.
Come up, because they can't hear you.
People are watching on TV and want to hear what you have to say.
What do you hear?
You just sit down and speak into the microphone.
Thank you. I'm at the lower end of that diagram there, not in the yellow areas, and yet I received this. Am I impacted by this?
I would have to look in our mapping system on what your property address is and see where the special flood hazard area falls on your property.
Okay, appreciate that.
We did send out the notice to properties that abutted the special flood hazard area. So just because you receive one doesn't necessarily mean that it will impact you, but we would have to look at specifics for each property.
Let me ask you a couple of quick questions. Can you define new development? What does that mean?
So FEMA defines new development as any new structure or impervious surface that's constructed within the special flood hazard area. And they normally define it as a structure, like a new structure going in. So if you were to put in a new boathouse or an addition to your house or an ADU, that would be classified as.
So that would
Also
apply,
include any fill,
right?
And tree removal.
tree removal?
Yeah, it doesn't, it does include fill, it does include tree removal, but it does not include anything that's not classified as substantial improvement.
What is the process of evaluating no net loss?
So it kind of depends on which option we choose. If we go forward with the staff recommendation of the model ordinance, essentially to demonstrate no net loss, there are 8 different factors that this habitat assessment will have to look at, which includes things like riparian vegetation makeup, dissolved oxygen in the water, like water quality indicators. And you have to demonstrate in this habitat assessment that whatever proposed development you are planning to undergo will not negatively impact any of those indicators.
Homeowner, not a developer, if I decide to put my house on the market, at what point and who do what consultant would I have to take into the process to evaluate the no net loss criteria?
You mean like at what point in the process you'd need to do that?
Yeah.
So that would be early in the permitting process. This is something FEMA is proposing to be submitted with the application. So whenever you're designing your project, if whatever you're proposing is in the special flood hazard area, you would have to engage a qualified consultant who is qualified to do habitat assessments or biological reviews and submit it with the application at that time.
Okay, just as a generality, what species are they looking for? Just off the cuff.
The most common one in Oregon is, what's the specific salmon?
It was salmon that was listed in the report.
Asking for the specific.
I can't remember the specific type of salmon, but it's salmonid species,
I'm sorry, I
endangered
didn't hear
salmon
you.
species. Endangered salmon species.
Salmon,
Salmon.
sturgeon, oolachon, and orcas.
The main one that would affect Lake Oswego is salmon.
It's been very helpful. I don't have any salmon anywhere close, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? The public hearing is now closed, and the commission will begin its deliberations. No public comment is permitted during deliberations. Okay. So this is, do we have any deliberation, any comments, questions? Or we can move on to a motion, correct?
There we go. There's the mic. So from my experience in development, since we mentioned ADUs, the additional cost of doing this assessment would increase the cost of building housing in the form of ADUs for property owners. I do think it's worthwhile to protect our habitat, but just wanted to make note of it that that does increase the cost of housing and adding accessory dwelling units on properties of this type.
For processing fees, for application fees?
To hire the consultant.
Oh,
Correct. To the extent the ADU would be placed within the special flood hazard, the flood
Yes,
management
it
area.
would be a very special circumstance.
Very
but
special
I-
circumstance,
I'd like
right.
it noted.
Right. Typically, we find boathouses to be in that area, although the wastewater treatment plant location down there is in the flood, is partly in the flood management area, so.
I would also note that even if we didn't adopt these standards, the obligation to comply with the Endangered Species Act still persists. So again, this is why staff is recommending the model code, is because at least we will have standards that the property owner will be able to see and meet, and show how they meet, rather than just generally having to comply with the Endangered Species Act.
Yeah, I guess I would add that to that end, it would be a cheaper option than having to sort of create sort of your own analysis of your compliance with FEMA from scratch. At least we'd have sort of defined parameters that you'd be looking for, and we'd be able to offer flood insurance, which is something that we wouldn't do under the third option there. So, yeah.
the city would be able to offer flood insurance to the applicant.
Not the city, but we could continue to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program.
Thank you for the clarification.
What is the current, how does it work now? I mean, I understand that, this is the result, I think, of a lawsuit that's going on, but what is the current process without these being adopted yet?
So you mean like the current floodplain review
If
process?
somebody wants to build a ADU or a boathouse in a zone that's in the, what do they have to do as part of their application currently?
So what we do currently, I do those reviews for building permits. So if you propose something like a boathouse, the extent of the review now is there's a permit form that FEMA has set up that we basically just adopted their permit form that asks for information about final finished floor elevation, lowest adjacent grade, if the space beneath the base flood elevation is enclosed or not, if it's a living space, and then the applicant has to provide a site plan that is completed by a licensed surveyor that shows where that base flood elevation falls on their property in relation to the proposed development. So they basically have to show, here's where the floodplain is, here's where what I'm proposing to build is, and then they're allowed to build within that area still, but if you do, it has to be elevated above the base flood elevation, and everything below has to be flood-proofed. So that's kind of the extent of the requirements now, is ensuring all new or substantial improved development is either elevated above the base flood elevation or flood-proofed below it.
Okay, thank you.
And I would just, again, summarize. The current program is to make sure that the development, the structure, is not damaged by a flood, so that FEMA doesn't have to pay out. This is to make sure that development within the flood management area doesn't hinder, is a burden upon the compliance with the Endangered Species Act. All federal agencies need to show how their actions might negatively affect the Endangered Species Act. So this doesn't protect the homeowner, that's true. The FEMA does, I mean, the flood insurance program does. This is to make sure that the Endangered Species Act and the habitat of the endangered species is being protected.
And the salmon and the orcas. Yep.
Evan, I had one question for you. A little while ago, you asked if any of us are in a floodplain area. So I might be, I'm not exactly sure looking at that little tiny map, so.
I guess the question would be, okay, so that's a yellow flag. So do you foresee any development on that site that would be below the flood management area?
No.
Because that's when you would be impacted.
Okay, so no.
All right, thank you.
So you've removed the yellow flag. Thank you. Okay, so these deliberations are for us to recommend to the council either to approve as proposed, approved with revisions, or recommend the proposal not be approved. So do we have any further deliberation?
Are we recommending to the city council now, or are we tentatively approving to come back with findings?
Second one.
Any additional questions, deliberations? So then, do we have a motion?
I move to tentatively approve the proposal and direct staff to prepare written findings, conclusions, and recommendations and present to the commission at its next meeting for adoption.
Do we have a second? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Motion passes. I guess I needed to call roll on the motion. That was, thank you for the staff report. Is that it? Okay. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Do we have other business? No? And so next on the agenda, schedule review.
All right, thank you, Chair Moreno. So coming up at our next meeting on October 28th, we'll have a hearing on the climate-friendly and equitable communities citywide parking reform proposal. So that will be the sort of main event on the 28th. We'll also have findings for the two items that we had hearings on tonight that will be coming back for your final approval. So those will also be considered on the 28th. On the 13th of November, we will then be considering, ideally, if you do recommend tentative approval of the climate-friendly and equitable communities code amendments, then there would be a finding adoption for that, as well as our first work session of this year on the 2024 to 2025 annual code amendments. So we did sort of a version of this last year. We do it every year. So that will be the first work session for the proposed amendments this year. And in addition to that, we will have a update rather on the city's electric vehicle charging strategy. So that will be a little bit more of a full docket that day. So that takes us into, the next month or so.
Thank
Still
you.
looking at fun ideas for the 25th, though, Dave. So I'll hopefully have something exciting for you at some point here in the near future.
For the
Offsite
25th.
potentially. No promises.
The week of Thanksgiving?
It's actually, is that the week of Thanksgiving or is it the week after? I don't recall. I think it's the Monday before Thanksgiving. So I will double check that though. Yeah. Evan Boone, City Attorney Boone, just confirmed that. So unfortunately, it is the Monday before Thanksgiving. So apologies there. Technically, if we have an actual holiday on the day of the Planning Commission meeting, we'll bump it out to the Wednesday. But since it was earlier in the week than the holiday, we'll just hold it on that day.
Okay. Great, thank you. Okay, if we have nothing else, the meeting is adjourned.